You're listening to Thunderquack Podcast Network. This is the Thunderquack Podcast, the official podcast of Thunderquack Podcast Network, where anything can happen. So strap yourselves in and hold on to your butts. It's Thunderquack time!
Hello and welcome back to the Thunderquack Podcast, the official podcast of thunderquack.com, which you can get every other Tuesday, or early, I guess, every other Tuesday at patreon.com/thunderquack, just like our Patreon producers, Brian Mirowski and JJ Samuel do, or you can wait and get it late every other Friday on podcast services across the galaxy. I am one of your hosts, Michael Cohen.
And I'm your other host, Amanda Conkin.
Welcome. Last week we did our Eternals review.
Yes. I podcasted a lot last week. We did Eternals.
Yeah.
It was a lukewarm podcast. I feel like you and Curtis did not have a good time at Eternals. I had watched it twice though, and I will watch it a third time, probably in theaters.
Yeah.
Because I just am that kind of maybe I should go watch Ghostbusters instead. So maybe I won't do that, but I had a good time with it. And then I podcasted over at Riverdale Gang this week. Yeah. I like that every now and then I podcast at Riverdale Gang with zero context for that show. And I just don't watch it. I watch it for the first time while I'm talking to them. So I've seen 2 episodes of Riverdale, and they both happen to have been random episodes that I podcasted about. So it was a lot of podcasting for me last week.
And I really don't think it matters for Riverdale.
Okay.
That's the thing with that show.
That it's you can just come in. It is true. The thing is, actually, the podcast was for Rivervale because they're doing a 5-episode arc that seems like it's just nonsense, but it's 5 episodes of contained nonsense because I guess they're hitting their 100th episode soon. So okay. They're doing a 5-episode arc and then they're breaking for the year or whatever and coming back in the spring because I don't know. That's, I guess, how their seasons are set up. It's very weird. But it's a sort of a Twilight Zone-esque type of Anyways, if you have never watched Riverdale and you feel like jumping in the middle of the season, the first episode of this 5-episode Rivervale arc seems like a good place as any. So that's, yeah.
I mean, Riverdale is pure nonsense. It's absolutely just ridiculous. But it is one of the shows that I can't recommend highly enough. I love it. Crystal and I are way behind on it because we're way behind on everything. We've been watching You. That's been our show that we watch together right now. We're almost done. We're almost done the new season.
Nice.
But Riverdale is one of our shows that we watch together as well, and it's just the great thing about it is that it has its own rules and its own mythology and sort of lives and dies by that, but it is generally internally consistent. Some of those rules are really stupid. They're really, really dumb. But like I said, it is actually consistent with its own stupid rules, which I for longtime listeners, they'll know that hey, that counts for a lot with you and I.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
I don't care what stupid magic elements you want to bring into this. I don't care what nonsensical storytelling plot device you want to have, as long as you're consistent with how it's used, or you're consistently inconsistent, right? It's
that's
it's pointedly
that's all it takes.
Yeah, the important part I think for us is the intent, right? When it's there because you're lazy, right? Because I don't know, sometimes Superman's powers do this and sometimes they do that. And it's that's where we get frustrated with Smallville, or on Arrow. It's sometimes he can fall 3 stories and roll and hit the ground running. And other times he falls out a window and then the episode ends on a cliffhanger. 'Cause you're oh my God. And it's he fell he fell 4 feet. It's like, it's not a big deal. Last week, he
Yeah.
literally got exploded out a window and fell 3 stories. This week, he gets kicked, and we're supposed to believe that he's possibly dead. The lead character of our show in the 3rd
Yep.
season? I don't think so.
Yep.
You know, and that's where we have issues with Arrow, right? But the thing about Riverdale is that, like, as much as it is just like obscenely ridiculous at times, where you're like, I'm sorry, wait a second, what? These teenagers are running, I'm sorry, a speakeasy underneath underneath the diner underneath the diner, and everybody knows, but no one's stopping it.
Yep. Yep.
They're teenagers. They're like, we're talking about 16-year-olds. Okay, cool. Cool. As long as we all agree that this is dumb, and everybody knows that it's dumb, and the show even acknowledges from time to time that it's dumb. Oh wait, in the new season, now they're running a brothel? Those same teenagers. Okay, well they're 17 now, so I guess that it's nope, nope,
It's a
nope.
lateral move.
Nope,
Yep.
still doesn't make any sense. Still doesn't make any sense. But in that world, in Riverdale, it's like, oh, well, Riverdale is like the worst place on the planet. And that's like earlier this year they announced, like, they dropped the bomb of like, hey, now that her show's canceled, Sabrina's going to show up on Riverdale. And it's like, you guys couldn't have done this crossover when both shows
The
were
show
running. I
actually
don't
happened. Yeah.
but yeah, she's going to show, or maybe she already has shown up on an episode.
No, she wasn't in the first episode. She's gonna apparently show up. Apparently, there was some sort of politics. Ryan did touch on it briefly because I think he knew
Okay.
more about the Sabrina thing. But she's that's part of the Rivervale.
But yeah, she's gonna show up, and it's like, and I was like, yeah, okay, awesome, I'm down, because more Kiernan Shipka as Sabrina, the teenage witch. I'm not gonna complain, because I love that show as well. That show also very dumb, very dumb, but also very good in different ways, like in its own ways. Yeah, a good horror anthology show, light. You know, like
It's
in the same way
anthology,
that Supernatural is like horror light, right? Like, it's like,
right?
oh,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
cool, we're gonna dabble in
No,
horror,
I get
but we're not
scared.
gonna go
That
full
scares
on.
me.
Very similar.
That's fair. I don't know. The Winnebago episode in the first
Winnebago.
season is,
Okay, so
I don't know, Winnebago.
Winnebago and Wendigo are the two words that you've combined here. A Winnebago being a recreational vehicle, and a
Yeah.
Wendigo being a supernatural
Yep.
forest
That would be
spirit.
it. That would be it.
Yeah.
Anyways, the latter. As much as I'd like to see a supernatural episode about Winnebagos, it was a creepy episode. I just will like always remember that being a really creepy episode when I watched it in the first season.
Yeah, you're going.
Not like scary stuff.
That's like
Not
season
like
1,
scary.
isn't it?
It's a deep cut. It is.
Yeah.
That's what I said. I said in the first season. That's the first.
My
season
favorite
episode.
one, not my favorite, but one of my favorite episode of Supernatural is the Groundhog Day episode.
Oh, that by far.
Where
Yes,
Dean just
that is
keeps
a
dying over and over, and they drop a piano
spectacular,
on him at one point. It's just like that.
spectacular
That was the point with that
episode.
show where I was like, oh, Supernatural is a cartoon show. I didn't
Yeah.
realize.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite episodes is, I think, maybe from that same season. That's either season 4 or 5. The Christmas episode with the Santa Claus that's like torturing them. It's a good horror episode. The Christmas one.
Yeah.
I can't remember.
Yeah.
I think it's season 5. But I just remember there's
About
like a
as far as I
scene where
got.
they're like pulling somebody's fingernails off or something.
Oh, yeah,
You remember what I'm talking
Oh my
about?
gosh,
Yeah.
no, I do. That was like it was the Krampus episode or something, like, right? It was like they don't, or it was like the idea of like the pagan festival gods or whatever, because they got into gods in the 5th season, right? Where they
Yeah.
like started dealing with like gods in other cultures. So
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
cool.
There's some good episodes of Supernatural. There's a lot of really bad ones though.
Well, yes.
The
I
ones
mean, you're bound to get a little bit of both when you're dealing with
I like
so
whenever
much
they
content.
cross over with reality. Those episodes where it's like,
Oh yeah.
I don't remember
Yeah.
who it was, if it was Sam or Dean. I think it was Dean. Ends up like in reality, where like Jared Padalecki is now playing Jared Padalecki. And
Oh no,
it's
that's
like,
no, they both do. They both do. It's a Loki episode where they like where Loki turns them into themselves, like into the
that's
actors.
right. Yeah.
And then they're married to the actual, like, Ruby is the demon that wound up
Yeah.
marrying, like, Jared Padalecki, and that actress got married, and so it's like a thing that he shows up at home and she's there like waiting for him, and he's
Yeah.
like, "Hey, dear."
Yeah.
Yeah.
Supernatural, good stuff. Riverdale,
It's a
good
good it's
stuff.
good. Yeah. Yeah, look at all these
Sabrina, good
CW
stuff. I mean,
popcorn
like,
shows.
look,
It's good.
it's all. These are all better investments of your time than season 3 onward of Arrow. Just Crystal did it right. Crystal watched the first two seasons of Arrow. Like, I can't remember when it was. I think it was like, I think we were into like season 3 or 4, and she was like, "Oh, I'll give it a try," and she started watching Arrow. And I think this was back when it was like on Netflix or something.
Right.
And she started watching it and was like, "Oh, this is actually pretty good," and watched through the first 2 seasons. And then she got to season 3, and I think she made it like 2 episodes in and like never continued. And it was like, no, yeah, you did that right. You definitely did that right. Sarah came back, and then you stopped. That's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
That's where we should have stopped. In hindsight, we would have been much happier people. Yeah, but that might be pre Patreon. so
I
you
think
know,
so. I think so, yeah.
yeah. Then we're not locked into podcasting in perpetuity until you guys all stop supporting us on Patreon. Please don't stop supporting us on Patreon. But but know that it is a double-edged sword. That as long as that's happening,
Yeah.
that the podcasts have to continue. It's it's like a monkey's paw. It's like like we launched the Patreon. It's like, I really hope people like us enough to support us, and it's like, oh no, people do like us enough to support us. We can't stop now.
Now we have to keep going.
Yeah, it's like it's like the genie. It's like Jafar at the end of Aladdin, where he wishes to be the genie, and then it's like, and then the shackles come on, and then he gets sucked into the lamp, and like, oh, okay, I guess this is how it is now. It's really late, and I've been up since 4:30 in the morning. It's 10:15 at night, and I was up at 4:30 in the morning with a cat who wasn't allowed to eat because he needed to go to the vet today, and it's not fair because, like, I had to deal with him not sleeping because he wanted food, and then he gets sedated and then gets to be high for the rest of the day, walking around the house stumbling, looking at walls like he's never seen a wall before. It's a very interesting experience to watch a cat walk around your house high, just like, he's
Oh
just like,
no.
he
Aw.
would just like, his hind legs, it took a really long time for him to sort of like get his balance back on his hind legs. His front legs were okay, but his hind legs were still kind of wobbly for about 2 hours after he came out of it. And so he's just stumbling around. Pepper, of course, that we're talking about. He's like stumbling
Pepper
around,
Pot.
and then every once in a while he would just kind of freeze, and then just like lower his butt down to the ground and sit, and then just sit there. And if you like looked at him from the front, his eyes were just glassy, and you could tell that he was just like having a bad trip. He was just like, what
Aw.
is going on? It's so not fair. But but they needed to do blood work, and he's a bit of a jerk and doesn't
Oh,
want to sit still for things, so they had to sedate him.
that's fair. That's
Poor
fair.
guy.
I mean,
Poor
I
guy.
feel like that's the life of a cat.
Oh
Life of
my
a cat.
god. I spent so much money on this cat today. So
Oh
much money on this
no.
cat.
Yep. Yep.
It's just like, yeah. I was raised in a household where it's like, hey, the cat might be sick. Okay, say goodbye to the cat, everybody.
Aw.
So or I mean, like, that's being generous. It was actually like, hey, the cat might be sick, which is a conversation that was had in private away from the ears of children. And then you would get home from school and it would be like, hey, so yeah, bad news. It happened 3 times in my life.
No way. That's
Yeah,
brutal.
yeah,
That's so sad.
yeah. But
Oh.
it's all good. It's all good. So it's weird. It's weird to now be dealing with it, um, with
As
Pepper.
an adult with the cats, yeah. That
Yeah,
you get to
and
make those decisions and what you do, yeah.
yeah, because I know that my parents definitely wouldn't have dropped the amount of money that I just did. Not even for the actual treatment, just for can you figure out
Figuring
what's
it out.
wrong with my cat and
Yeah.
why he keeps
Yeah.
throwing up all the time. Um,
Aw,
yeah. So, anyways,
poor Pepper.
he'll be fine. He's gonna be fine. It's he's Pepper, right? It's it's
Yeah,
kind of
yeah,
the
yeah,
blood
yeah,
work,
yeah, yeah,
or
yeah.
like early test results or whatever came back, and the vet's like, it's he might have something with his kidneys, but like it might just be an
Right.
infection or something. So they gave him antibiotics already, and it's like, oh, like the vet's
Hopefully
like,
he's good.
get either like if you bring us a urine sample
Oh, no.
we can confirm it. And and I said to Crystal, I was like, how do you do that? How do you do that? Like you can't, I can't do that because he's not gonna. It's because the vet's like, oh, you just just put just empty the litter box, and like when he goes in the litter box, get it out of there, and then you can put everything back in the litter box. And it's like, I know Pepper. If there's nothing in the litter box, he's just not going to. Right? Like
Yeah,
he's just gonna.
that's fair. Yep.
So it's like that's not gonna work. And then on top of it, it's like, what are you gonna do? You're gonna charge me more money for this, aren't you? You know.
Aw. Yep.
So we're just
Yep.
like, you know what? We'll just wait. We're just gonna wait it out. We're just gonna wait and see what the antibiotics do and see if he's okay. But yeah, that's been my day today. So if I'm a little punchy, that's why. And I stayed up a little bit later than I should have last night watching The Matrix. So it was which
Aw.
was in hindsight, it had to be done. I didn't have a choice. I needed to watch The Matrix before we recorded this episode, and I left it to the last minute, not really thinking about the fact that my Monday was going to be completely screwed over by this cat.
Aw. Yes.
Um, it was totally worth it because the movie was awesome. But we're going to talk about that in a minute. But yeah, I'm a little sleep deprived. But before we get into The Matrix, really quick, I want to talk about Ghostbusters. Totally spoiler
Nice.
free. I just want to tell everybody that as a lifelong, and when I say lifelong, I mean like as far as I know from day one, like there are two things that I do not remember becoming a fan of. It's Ninja Turtles and Ghostbusters. I just have always been a fan of those two things. Um, Having to do greatly with the fact that they have existed basically like since I was born and are right up my alley.
Right?
So
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
I yeah, like I don't remember the first time I saw Ghostbusters. I do have a memory of the first time I watched. Well, I don't know if it's the first time I watched Ninja Turtles, but one of my earliest memories is watching Ninja Turtles with my dad, which is probably one of the reasons why it's like indelible, right? But Ghostbusters is one of those things that like I don't know. I was probably like 3 years old the first time that I watched Ghostbusters, which I know to some people they'll be like, I'm sorry, what? You watched Ghostbusters when you were 3? It's like, yeah, so did Kara. Kara watched Ghostbusters when she was like 2. We were watching the cartoon when she was like a year and a half old. Relax about it. I saw it twice. I saw it on the advanced screening night on Wednesday. Um, and then took Kara and Crystal came as well on Saturday to see it. It was even better the second time around. Like once it's it's like some movies, it's like, and I find like with a lot of these like reboot revival like 40-year sequels, I like Ghostbusters and The Force Awakens and stuff like that. It's like the first go is just like it's just pure reaction of like, oh okay, all right, okay, and you're just trying to, I don't know, just like stay in your seat as you react to these like ridiculous things that you're seeing in a positive way, obviously. Um, but then on the second viewing, you can be like, okay, oh, okay, so that's where they set up that thing that comes later, and it's like you get to you can actually like appreciate how well a movie is written. and it's a I am fond of saying that the original Ghostbusters is a 10 out of 10. Like, it's a perfect 10 movie. As a matter of fact, the original Ghostbusters is the movie that like where like I coined my terminology of like a perfect 10. Like, Ghostbusters is actually the benchmark on that for me. It's like, if it can be as tight as that movie, then it's a perfect 10. If it comes close, it's a perfect 10 in
Nice.
my opinion. And this new one, nothing. I don't know if there's a movie for me that really can beat the original Ghostbusters. It The last couple of months, sort of in the lead up to this one, and just sort of reconnecting with Ghostbusters in this way, and then watching this movie has sort of brought it back. Like, actually, Ghostbusters might be my favorite movie. Like, it might be like my number one favorite movie,
Wow.
like above Star Wars, above the Marvel stuff, above Indiana Jones. Like, it because it's such a funny thing of like, it doesn't matter. Like Star Wars, there's a lot of times where I'm like, I'm not in the mood. I don't really feel like it, or like it'll ebb and flow where like I just won't really care about Star Wars that much for like 2 or 3 months, and then it'll come back and that sort of thing. But Ghostbusters, like, if somebody walked up to me at any point in time in the day, any day of the week, any time of year, and said, "Do you want to watch Ghostbusters with me right now?" I would be like, "Yeah, yes, let's watch
Really?
Ghostbusters." Yeah, like,
Wow.
I don't know how many times I've seen that movie. It is at this point impossible to count. Um, I mean, it was probably impossible to count from like the third time. It was impossible to count from the first time because I couldn't count the first time that I saw it. So
Aw,
I've literally never been able to count how many times I've seen Ghostbusters. Um,
that's cute.
it's just
Love
like,
it.
I don't. It's like, it's just in my DNA. Like, that logo. My kindergarten school picture is of me in my Ghostbusters uniform. Like,
What? That's
yeah,
adorable.
I so yeah,
Amazing.
like Slimer, the Ghostbusters logo, the Ecto-1 proton packs, like these things are just in my DNA. And Kara loves Ghostbusters as well. She says it's the best one. She
Oh,
hasn't seen the
really?
20 we
Wow.
haven't watched the 2016 one because I can't bring myself to watch it again. I just I
Fair.
just can't do it.
Fair. Fair.
So she says it's the best one out of the three that she's seen: Ghostbusters 2, and now Afterlife. And when I asked her why, she said she didn't want to do a podcast about it. So I like, but
Aw.
she said that I could talk about her opinion on the podcast. Um, she said the reason why it's better than the first one is that it's actually spookier than the original one. So
Oh,
she thinks
interesting.
that there are better scares in the new one. It's so much fun talking to a 5-year-old about this stuff because it just reconnects you with the 5-year-old in you, of like,
That is
I'm just like,
adorable,
okay,
yeah.
yeah, that's a good reason to like a Ghostbusters movie. Um
Yep.
yeah, it's like it's wall to wall funny. I mean, like, it definitely gets a little bit on the nose towards the end of the movie, but it's actually, I feel like it's entitled to. Um it's not a
Fair.
spoiler to say that the original Ghostbusters are in it. Like, that's been announced. It's been a part of the promotional stuff. So it's like that stuff is all kind of as it's kind of as sappy and cheesy as you'd expect it to be, but it's also like, yeah, of course it is. Um and they earn it, and it's okay. And Bill Murray is Bill Murray, so I'll allow it. But yeah, I highly
I'll
recommend
allow
it.
it.
I think that everybody should go see it. I think it's I want to try and go see it in IMAX. I don't know if I'll get the opportunity to go see it in IMAX before it leaves IMAX, but yeah, I mean, I'd recommend go see it. Go see it on a nice big screen. Um,
Alright.
get some popcorn, some candy, and if you're lucky enough to have a Coke freestyle machine, you get your. I like to get the cherry vanilla Coke, but what I do is, this is my tip:
Oh.
I do the cherry vanilla like to 3/4, and then I do vanilla Coke the rest of the way, so that it's cherry with extra
Oh.
vanilla. Uh,
Oh, see, I get cherry Sprite because it's the only time I get cherry Sprite there, and I get it at Denny's because those are the only two places that I like can get it.
Yeah.
And I really like because cherry Coke is all right, but I don't like Coke generally
And
speaking.
we
So
and
if I
we
have
both
like
tried to order our
oh
soda with
yeah, that was so
cherry at the
funny.
VIP theater when we saw Venom, and she was like,
Yeah,
"Yeah, totally, we can do that." And it was like, "Oh, that's awesome! I didn't know you could do that." And then she brought out our
yeah,
drinks
the
and two
maraschino
maraschino
cherries.
cherries.
It was so funny. It was like,
I
no,
was
no,
like,
we wanted the fake cherry syrup that goes in the drink.
"Yeah,
That's
not
different
that's not
cherry.
quite what we meant, but A+ for
Yeah.
effort." Um, she she accomplished what she told us she could do, and therefore
Yeah.
like
Yep.
I find no fault
Yeah, exactly.
in the
That's totally
server
fine.
in her
Totally
actions.
fine.
It was
Yep.
just us going like, can we get that with cherry? And she was like, yeah, I can definitely go to the bar and get you maraschino cherries, that's not a problem. It's like, okay, all
Yeah.
right, we have some cross wires here, but that's all right. It didn't take anything away from the experience. uh
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
was it's
Yeah.
a fun story. But yeah, Ghostbusters, go see it. I'm gonna be recording a podcast, a dedicated. I guess it'll be an episode of Metaphysical Fiction with
Oh.
Carl from the Wampus Lair and
Are you gonna
Joe
do it
Hogan.
instead of your thing next week? You can just do it instead of the off the record.
Yeah, we're recording it tomorrow though, so I'll probably just edit it tomorrow and
Oh.
put it out. So you guys will have it
Well
by
then.
Wednesday. But
Look at all those extra podcasts
yeah,
everybody's gonna get then.
it's just
How
gonna be a
exciting.
bonus. It's
Nice.
Ghostbusters. It's worth it. It's fine.
Oh,
Uh,
okay.
you had stuff that you wanted to talk about though.
Oh, mostly just the super randomness of well, actually, no, we were speaking about CW trash shows. And I feel like I did see, as much as I'm not paying attention to stuff, every now and then stuff comes into my feed. And didn't like Nicole Kang tweet like her Poison Ivy look for Batwoman? It was
Yeah.
like the first time that somebody had like really enticed me by Batwoman. So I felt like that was worth being like, hey, I'm not watching that show, but maybe I will because this Poison Ivy looks super rad. Because as everybody, if you have listened to this podcast, knows, my Batman is the Batman and Robin version with Uma Thurman as Poison Ivy. So that's like my OG Poison Ivy. And I feel like her
Yeah.
costume is like super inspired by that Poison Ivy. And I just think it looks super rad. And I hope that they do something fun with Poison. I don't know. It looks like they're gonna do some fun things
It,
in Batwoman. So
yeah. I'm not. I'm so like not in on that stuff. So I just on any of the CW stuff as we talked about a couple weeks ago. Um, and with Batwoman especially, I in particular because like with season 1 with Ruby Rose, like after the crossover, I was like, yeah, I'm
yeah.
definitely a no on this one. So
Right.
I didn't watch any of season 1. Um, I believe the hype that I don't know the name of the actor that replaced her. That came in as Batwoman in season 2.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. Me
but I've
either.
heard a lot of good things, and I have no reason to disbelieve that. And the people that are talking about it, I value their opinions on the CW stuff. It's just one of those things of like, yeah, I don't know, I don't want to have to like care about that first season though, and I know that I could skip it, but like it's one of those things. But that said, the costumes for Batwoman, they've been pretty
They're
solid.
phenomenal. Yeah.
They've been pretty
Yeah. Really good.
solid, and
Yeah.
I mean, like Andy, our friend Andy Poon has been working on Batwoman. I don't know if he's still working on Batwoman. I haven't talked to him in a while, but I yeah, I mean, like they've been doing a really good job on that show
Cool.
with the costumes. I wish they would put as much work into the costumes on Superman and Lois. It's probably that's the one thing on
Thing that
that
you're kind of
show
like
that
bummed.
like I Superman looks good, but I one of the other characters, I don't want to spoil it because he's revealed as another character partway through the season, but one of the characters shows up in an outfit, and it's like, guys, I think we probably could have done another draft on this one. I don't.
Oh,
It
bummer.
doesn't quite
Bummer.
work. It doesn't quite work, but it's also an
Um,
ambitious character to try and do. So, I
I am
I
gonna say because I looked her up because I didn't know the name of the actress, but I do just want to say it
yeah
was. I think it's Javicia Leslie is the name of the woman that
yeah
took over
yeah.
on Batwoman. So that's
Um,
a great name.
yeah, and
Anyways, sorry, carry on.
the show is pretty popular. People seem to like it quite a bit.
Yeah,
So I don't know.
yeah.
I'm sure it's good by CW
I
DC standards and all that. But
The thing I like is that Cameron Johnson, who I guess is he posts photos in a bat suit of some kind, so I feel like he's something on it. I don't know who. He's Lucius's son, nephew, or his
yeah,
son,
and I
whatever
think
it
that
is.
he's Batwing.
Yeah.
I think
Okay.
that's
Yeah. No,
the
that makes sense.
character.
Bowing.
Yeah.
Anyways, he was at the same film festival that my short film was in. He had made like an animated short that won at the festival, which was really cool. But he seems like a rad guy, so I feel like I support Batwoman because it's got cool people in it. So, which is cool. But it's also like how I get all my Batwoman news is by following specific people on on Instagram and
Yeah.
Twitter. Um, but anyways, my other piece of pop culture things that I'm getting again through osmosis, where you're just kind of like, but I feel like Pete Davidson is having like a pretty rad couple years, and I don't know, I feel like it's very hard to not be inundated with like popular culture news, and the Kim Kardashian thing is just really through me, but also it's really funny where it's like it I don't know anything about Pete Davidson aside from like memes that I hear about. And actually every now and then I do watch SNL clips um often with him in them. I feel like I guess I know him from SNL for stuff. But it's one of these sort of interesting things at a time where there's a lot of conversation because Adele's new music came out, and I think a lot of people are talking about her particularly in her weight loss, and like we scrutinize women all the time for like
Hmm.
what they look like, and we judge, and but then there's what is the female equivalent of Pete Davidson, where you kind of are like, interesting, his romantic partners seem to have a lot of things in common with themselves, but you sort of look at them as a couple and you're like, it's just like a little bit out of the ordinary from the outside. You're like, what is it? And then the memes are great where people are like, people refuse to admit that Pete Davidson has a good personality. They just sort of look at it and go, "Meh? What's happening?" And it's like, maybe
Yeah.
he's
Well, I mean,
a cool guy.
he's
Like,
obviously a very funny person. I mean,
yeah, yeah,
he's great
yeah.
on SNL.
Mhm.
Like a standout cast member from the last few years, which is saying a lot because it's both saying a lot and not saying a lot. There have not been a lot of really great cast members in the last, I would say, probably like 10 years. I like since sort of like the end of the I think like really like when Kristen Wiig left, I think was sort of the end of SNL being
Was that
particularly
10 years
relevant.
ago? That seems
I
like
don't.
way
That's
too
not
many
quite
years
10
ago.
years ago,
I was gonna say
it's
no. I feel like
definitely
I like
it's
Michael
definitely
Shea
been a few
and
years.
I like Michael Shea and Mr. Johansson. I think that they do a pretty good job on Weekend Update.
Yeah,
So
no, I mean, and there's good stuff on SNL, but it's not like I
did
don't
you not get
know.
my Mr. Johansson joke? That was funny.
I got it.
Come
Yeah,
on.
I got it.
Okay.
I it's not like it like because I think like the last time that it was really like huge was like when Andy Samberg was still there
Yeah, yeah,
and all
yeah.
that, right?
Yes.
That's definitely like that's been like 10 years.
Yeah. He's definitely one of the only cast members that I like know of by name,
Yeah.
which
Um
is but I
but
don't know if I know him by name because of the way that people talk about him in his relationships, which
I
is
think it's become a thing because it's like because he was with Ariana Grande, right? And then they
mhm,
broke up. And then he
mhm.
was with Kate Beckinsale for a while, I think.
I think so.
Which was like, okay, all right. I don't understand why Kate Beckinsale is hanging out with it. Also, like there's a pretty big age gap there, and it was just like, all right, okay, well, good for both of them, I suppose. And now with this latest one, it's just like I think at this point, it's just become a thing of like he's Pete Davidson. Like it's like that's why Kim Kardashian is now with him because here we are for I think maybe the first time ever on the Thunderquack podcast talking about Kim Kardashian.
Wow,
because of
actually,
this.
yes, that's totally true.
So
I
not
actually
to
don't
be
think we talk about
too
her.
cynical about it, not to be too sort of, I don't know, maybe it's kind of gross, but I don't really see anything that Kim Kardashian does as uh, a human act of sincerity. I think that she's a corporate robot machine that just makes more money, and so all of her decisions are motivated by the nature of her being, which is that a
Corporate
physical
robot machine? I
entity
love that.
whose sole purpose is the generation of more wealth. And so I think that like good for Pete Davidson in this instance. I Kim Kardashian is a tricky one for me. I think that like the last few years of enabling Kanye West's mental breakdown so that they could get more publicity was pretty gross. Um, I'm
This
not
this
taking any of the onus away from Kanye West. I think that like he also is responsible for like, hey man, you need to go check yourself in somewhere and sort some stuff out because clearly, you've got a few crossed wires going
Yeah.
on here. But I but definitely like she kind of just went like, yeah, no, there's nothing wrong. Everything's fine, and it's like everything is clearly not fine. There's been some weird erratic behavior coming from
Yes.
Kanye over the last few years. I So yeah, I don't think that was a healthy relationship. I don't think that was a good place for Kanye to be in. And I think that his mental state was definitely affected by it.
This is the weirdest podcast we've ever made
Is
about
it?
talking about Kanye West and Kim
Yeah.
Kardashian. I
Well,
just feel like it's
this
so weird. The Okay, this is a
go
nice
ahead.
quote though, because I didn't know that he was with Kate Beckinsale. I just knew the Ariana Grande and the other thing. But there's like without actually clicking on the article and just looking at what Google is pulling up, it's apparently one of the reasons that Beckinsale said that they broke up is because she struggled with the attention on her relationship and that he lives his life with his heart on his sleeve. And I think that's like a really cute, caring, kind, like
Mhm.
way. I don't pay attention to who he is as a human. I just pay attention to who he is as a online
I
presence or
see.
comedian. So I'm like,
I read that a little bit differently.
oh, do you? Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
Um, I think that that's a really sweet and kind way of saying that he's a bit of a dope,
Aw,
who doesn't know when to stop talking, uh,
aw.
and what I know of his personality and sort of his public persona at least, that's sort of how I read that, is that like Kate Beckinsale was like, yeah, I've done public relationships. I'm not really into that right now. I mean, like Kate Beckinsale, she's a mature woman, she
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah,
need to put up with nonsense. And she's Kate Beckinsale. Like,
yeah.
she's
Oh,
one
she's
of the
actually
most
doing this.
stunning human beings who's ever graced this earth. I Yeah.
She is pretty rad. She's pretty
Um,
rad.
not a phenomenal actor, but she looks really good in leather in a
Absolutely.
movie that wanted to be The Matrix. Uh,
And
uh,
then wasn't quite the Matrix.
yeah,
But it's
pretty close. I mean, it's pretty close.
yeah,
Matrix with vampires and werewolves, basically. Right.
that's fair. That's fair. Anyways,
Um,
not to like drag Pete. I don't know. I just think it's just really
no,
interesting that I would
like
like somebody to send me a female version of Pete Davidson
yeah.
or any relationship where people look at it and they automatically go, "How did this girl get this guy?" Like I know that this is like a weird sexist thing, but I feel like because I'm a woman, I can maybe say it. But like they just don't doesn't seem to be the same kind of pass for women as there
Okay,
is for like some men.
I'll give you one. I'll give you one.
Okay.
I don't know Hugh Jackman's wife's name. I think she's a producer. Like she's like a movie producer. Um and they've been together since he was like just an actor in Australia, like before he had his big break as Wolverine and everything. Like they've been together for a really long time. I The last time I checked they were still together. I don't know. I don't really follow Hugh Jackman's personal life in this way, but I just know that like it's of note that Hugh Jackman's wife is she's not unattractive, but she's definitely like very average, like just looks like a normal run of the mill human being. And then Hugh Jackman is Hugh Jackman. he's Wolverine. Like he's shredded beyond belief in some of those movies, and then on top of that he's also like his talent and his charm and his wit and all of that stuff, right? Like and you kind of look at it and you go like it's always one of those things where and maybe this is sexist and let me know if it is so that I can adjust my behavior, but I look at it and I go like, well, like good for Hugh Jackman that he didn't succumb to what we see with like Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt and so many stars in Hollywood and stuff, where it's like they are in relationships and then uh and then they become famous and then they can be with whoever they want to be with, and they walk away from their existing partner,
And
right?
I mean,
Like
here's the thing though. When I look at these two, and I do look at how they like when they first got together, she's not in any way out of his league. Or he's not out of her league. She's
sure.
quite good looking. And he was actually a little bit funky looking when he was young. Like,
Yeah,
I don't know
sure.
if you look at these pictures,
Yeah,
he
yeah.
actually looks like a little bit of a nerdo. I love it. This is so cute. I've never seen these photos before. I had no idea that this is but, like, if you do look at the photos of when they were first together, like, their marriage photo, he's just so cute. He looks a little bit like Chandler Bing in this photo that I'm looking at. Anyways, it's not quite the same because she's not I don't look at her and I'm like, "That's so weird." They just do seem like they just seem like a normal couple. I
Yeah.
actually yeah, there's I mean, I guess it's sure. That is I've never thought of Hugh Jackman's wife before. That's so crazy. I didn't know that I don't even think that I knew Hugh Jackman had a wife. I feel like Pierce Brosnan as well. I've heard that about Pierce Brosnan and his wife.
Yeah.
But I do. I think that these are a little bit sexist because I'm trying to find like I'm trying to be like show me women that are like not movie star where they
It's a
which is like
difficult it's a
terrible.
it's a
Terrible.
difficult question to ask Google without coming off as a creep. Uh,
Yeah.
hey Google, find me a really pretty famous guy whose wife is not that attractive. It's like
It's terrible.
and Google's sitting there like, really?
Yeah.
Is that
Well,
look, I
and
get a lot of weird
but
requests
but
from
here's
people, but that's what you want to see
but
today?
one of the things too though is that like it's even in just IRL. Like it's a
Yeah.
little different when you kind of look at these movie stars where it's like maybe they met them before they were famous.
Yeah.
But like are there any sort of funky looking women that are famous that have like really like even that because you're like maybe it's the fame that like makes them a bit more like desirable or whatever it is. I don't know. I think I'm overanalyzing it a little bit, but it's a thing that I really as like you just can't help but like look at the world in very specific ways. And for me, I think it's of note that like with Adele and her and Rebel Wilson, that like the way that they were perceived by the media from weight loss was just like I'm like they're both freaking beautiful women, but like the abrupt shift in how they were talked about was just like so insane. And I mean, I guess that's just probably a an internet thing because I feel like Jonah Hill went through the same thing. But for Jonah Hill, he's still kind of funky looking because he was funky looking before. He's a funky looking dude. He's a comedian, right? Like there's certain
Yeah.
things. Whereas I feel like the I don't know, maybe it's just that like women wear makeup and it's just maybe less like there's less funky looking women. I don't know.
No, it's absolutely. I mean, like, look, the standard is wildly different. I don't think that
Yeah.
I don't think that that's a radical statement to make. I don't think that you're in dangerous waters at all in saying that. Like, no, there are totally different standards. I mean, like,
Yeah.
what can be considered handsome for a guy and what's attractive for a woman are very very different standards.
Yeah.
And a guy can put on a little bit of weight and a guy can grow out a shaggy gross beard and not cut his hair and let his appearance go but still be considered uh uh attractive, right? Like there's a lot of men who have aged like they've gone from like, oh, they're like a young hunk and then aged sort of out of that and then come back around. I mean, like um here's an actor that like never kind of went away is like Tom Selleck, right? He starts as Magnum PI, and he's like
Yeah.
he's hunky Tom Selleck Magnum PI. The mustache was in vogue at the time. That's when my dad has that mustache. Is definitely like my dad definitely rocks the Tom Selleck, and they're like all the way up through Three Men and a Baby and the sequel, and then on to Friends as and like very specifically on Friends as like, hey, look at he's like the hot older guy. And then even now in his like I think he's in like his 70s on Blue Bloods, and people are still like, if you ask anybody is like, hey, is Tom Selleck still hot? Like they'd be like, yeah, Tom Selleck still got it. He's still got it. He's still rocking the mustache, and he still looks good. And it's like, yeah, but he's like an old man now. Whereas like I think there are way less examples of women where you can do the same thing. Um, and I mean, we've talked about it before. This is where maybe it gets a little bit touchy. For me, I always kind of think that it's a shame when women are sort of I don't know how to phrase this. I don't because I don't want to like I don't want to make them seem like they're like they have no control over it or whatever. But like I think of Courtney Cox. It's funny we're talking about Tom Selleck, and then I'll go to Courtney Cox because they were Monica and Richard, right? Like
Yeah.
the connection there. But I look at Courtney Cox, and even towards the end of Friends, she was already starting to sort of like go a little bit hard on the Botox and that sort of thing. Like in the last season, that upper lip is starting to freeze a little bit. And when they did the reunion recently, it's just like it's not that she's unrecognizable, but it's like you can just see that she's had a lot of work done, right?
Mm.
um which to me is always this thing of like I hate it, not because like do whatever you want to do. If that's what makes her happy and makes her feel good about herself, then that's her decision, and I don't want to like judge somebody and say like, oh, I don't find Courtney Cox attractive anymore because of blah blah blah. That's not it's not what I'm trying to say. If
Mhm.
I'm not, if it comes off that way, it's not how I mean it. It's more so that like it it upsets me that so many women feel like they need to do that, like that they need to stay perpetually in their 20s in order
Yeah.
to be attractive, because I don't personally feel that way. And
Mm.
especially like as I get older, right? And now I'm 36, which technically puts me on the other side of my 30s, in my late 30s, right? Like there are lots of women in like their 40s and even women in their 50s that are in movies and on TV and stuff like that I'm like, and they still got it. I'm like we're
Yeah.
going to talk about The
Yeah.
Matrix, and Carrie Ann Moss in the trailers for The Matrix Resurrection still looks amazing. Like she's
Yeah.
still beautiful,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And I watched The Matrix last night, and I'm watching I live tweeted it, and if you go through like at the end, I tweeted like, hey, I accidentally live tweeted The Matrix. It's mostly just me simping for Carrie Ann Moss, and it's like because back then in 1999 she was amazing, and probably actually because I was 13 when I saw that movie, I probably actually informed a lot of things about the way that I feel about women in now in my 30s. I just because it was like formative years, right? And that movie was one of those ones where it was like, oh wow, very pretty lady. And I will not shy away from the fact that like I think women with ripped arms, like that, like really those really like defined shoulders and arms. It's like I find that incredibly attractive. And watching the movie last night, I was like, this might actually be the reason why. I think this might be. I think this might have been the thing that like I saw when I was 13 years old, where I was like, yeah, that's hot. Right. um so but looking at her now in the new one, like they just put out a bunch of posters, and she's got like a hero poster for Trinity, and I just look at it, I'm like, Keanu as well, though, where I'm like, I don't understand how these two are both like so flawless still. Like,
Yeah, Keanu
what are
Reeves
they
is
doing that the rest of us
delightful.
aren't? And it's, they're taking care of themselves, they're eating healthy, they have personal trainers and nutritionists, and they're rich people. But the answer is actually very simple. They have a lot of money, and it's their job to make sure that they look good. But it is one of those things where like I look at Carrie Ann Moss, and like I'm not an expert on the subject, but I don't think that she's been, getting work done. But she's just like, she's allowed herself to age naturally, and she still looks great. And there are lots of women in Hollywood that have done that, and it just like, I just look at it, and the Friends cast is one of those things that it's like, it's so easy to jump to because they just did that reunion thing, and it was
Yeah,
like, you can kind of tell that like Lisa Kudrow doesn't care, right? And she allowed herself to age, and she looks great. I think she looks fantastic.
yeah.
But then Jennifer Aniston and Courtney Cox, to varying degrees, have obviously continued to, do the various things that people in Hollywood do, to
Not just in
keep themselves
Hollywood. So
looking
here's
young.
the thing.
Sure, yeah,
I've had multiple conversations about this recently with like people in my peer group where I didn't realize how abnormal it was for people over the age of 30 to not get Botox. And by people, I mean women.
yeah,
And I guess it's not. It was more so just like who I was talking to. There were like certain pockets of different types of people, but it's like it's very pervasive. And I think it's just like the culture of aging and the culture
yeah.
that we're surrounded by constantly. So it's all good. Not to harp too much on this, but yeah, I mean, yeah, Carrie Ann Moss looks great. I'm looking at some images right now. She does still look quite lovely.
Yeah, yeah, and
Great.
yeah, I don't know. I'll just say it again. It's like, if that's something that you as a person, it's no different than if you want to like dye your hair blue. It's
Mhm.
like, I'm not gonna dye my hair blue. I don't find that more or less attractive. But I don't care. Like if it makes you feel good about yourself, then go do it. As long as you're not hurting another person, you're being, you're making good decisions for your own health and safety. Then go for it. Do whatever you got to do in order to have the confidence and like whatever you need to be happy, and there's enough bad stuff going on in the world. Don't feel guilty about getting minor cosmetic surgery or
Yeah.
Botox or whatever. Like, if it makes you feel happy and feel good about yourself, then more power to you. Like, it's just it's one of those things where it's like, I hate that society has been structured in a way that so many women, I think, feel like they have to, not that they have to continue to, like, that they have to look a certain way, but that like they have to continue to look like they're 20, right? That
Yeah.
like because it ties into like that whole like infantilization of women sort of thing, of like, oh, like how it doesn't matter, you can be 35 and people will still call you a girl, right?
Actually,
Like
this
that
is a
sort
whole
of
thing
thing.
too. Now that we're speaking of the Matrix, didn't that all happen? Because his girlfriend Alexandra Grant, like that, the visual artist, I think is what she is. She does like art, is like 48, which I think is younger than him, right? Because I think Keanu Reeves is a bit older than that. But she is, because she looks like a normal human being. I remember
Hmm.
people being all like, "This is such a mismatched couple," and it's like, no,
Because
they're
especially because
perfectly.
it's
Yeah, he's
Keanu,
50.
right?
He's
And
he's
yeah,
7 years, 10 years older. He's 57, so he's like 10 years older than her. And it's like people still, because she has like gray hair, are like, oh, he's with this girl that
yeah,
like. And again, I use the word girl to describe a 48-year-old, but because
yeah,
just like what we were talking about.
yeah.
Oh my gosh, the world is complicated. Let's talk about a future in which we all get put into a
Battery farms.
pods, and
Yeah.
yeah, so that we can generate electricity for the
So
robot overload.
so I watched The Matrix last night, for the first time in a while. And the further I got into it, the more I realized how long it's probably been since I've actually watched that movie from start to finish. And I it was enlightening, and the nostalgia component of it was so weird, and the stuff that I just talked about of like of realizing now as a 36-year-old man that as a 13-year-old boy watching the Matrix for the first time, it I one of the things that I tweeted is that like it cracked my mind open like a ripe melon. Like,
Nice.
and in more ways than one. So like there was definitely like the sexual part of it where it was like, whoa, this movie is I would say before the Matrix, it would have been the Fifth Element. That was probably like that was the first one where like
Oh, so good.
I was like, what's going on in this movie, and why am I starting to have these weird feelings? But with Mila Jovovich in that one,
Love
which
it.
like Fifth Element and the Matrix are some of the last like sexy sci-fi before everything started. Like sci-fi has become so, I think because they want movies to hit general audiences, right? And it's like everything's just sort of it's I hate to use this because I don't want to like put this on Disney because I don't think it's their fault. And it's such an easy like pot shot. It's so hacked to be like, oh, the Disneyfication of everything. But I do think that like that genres that were not as sanitized before, or ones that were like that were actually like a really good place for us to explore some of these things, have had that stripped away from them. And like sci-fi is one of those things where like hard sci-fi has a tradition of being sexy, and I don't just mean like exploitative of women. I like sci-fi and fantasy has also explored the male anatomy. It's definitely there, it's from different perspectives. There's definitely an objectification of women versus like a power fantasy for men. But I do think that in something like The Matrix, especially now with the context that we have of it in the year 2021, and the Wachowskis, um, and their journey since 1999 to now, um, and looking back on it, and you know looking at it as a trans allegory and stuff like that. Um, like there are all these other added levels and stuff, but like that, like there's a sexiness in the movie, and I don't think that it's objectifying on either end of the spectrum. There are moments, right, like the whole woman in the red dress thing, but it's actually the thing that I find the most interesting about that is that as an adolescent, I looked at that and probably related more to Mouse
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
not. And now I look at it and I go like it's actually played very importantly as juvenile. That like
Right. Okay.
it and it's actually used to set up for the moment later in the movie when because it's a badass moment when he dies, when he pulls out the two giant chain guns and goes down fighting or whatever. It's like, oh, I wasn't expecting that from that character, because there's so much that they set up about him that's counter to that idea, right? But
Yeah.
I so there's a lot of imagery there, and a lot of sort of like metaphor tied into that, into the gigantic guns. What's he compensating for? But as opposed to like it, what the funny thing is that they like Tank and Dozer don't even go into the Matrix. And Dozer is like
Right.
Dozer is the most intimidating physically out of all of the characters. He doesn't go into the Matrix, right? It's I but Tank and Dozer are
Isn't that like they're the what's the word for it? They're
I can't,
like
they were born in Zion,
born
right?
in
Like
this, yeah, 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 yeah.
they're
So they
not
can't
they're
go, they
not
can't,
batteries.
yeah,
Yeah, they can't
yeah, yeah,
go into
yeah.
the Matrix. But
Mhm.
like again, like man, it is such a funny thing because 2 and 3 come out, and the critical reaction is what it is, and the fan reaction is what it is, and I think that like the expectation was built up so much that nothing could have. I don't think that they could have put anything out that would have met the expectation, because having just rewatched the first movie, it is a cultural shift. Like
Oh yeah, yeah.
1999, there a bunch of things happened in 1999, obviously, but I think it's so interesting, and this is one of the places where like I can't believe in coincidence, because Agent Smith talks about it, that like, oh, we made your perfect world and you rejected it, and so like they picked the end of the
Of the
20th century
yeah,
as
yeah,
this very specific point. And it's so funny, 1999, 2 years later, 2001, September 11th happens, and the world changes, right?
yeah, yeah.
And we can't go back. Like, that genie can't go back into the bottle, and we live in the world that we live in now. And so much of what we talk about on a regular basis, of like the polarization of politics and stuff, it's all stuff that's existed, but it's just been like, that is the turning point. Like, that's the flashpoint. They really, like, I think puts us on that path to where we are now as a society. And it's like, how do we get back from that? I don't know that we do. But to
We
go
don't.
back and
Yeah.
to watch The Matrix, which is such a like snapshot of this point in time, both in terms of like, this is the content that we're making, but also like literally The Matrix within the context of the film, of the narrative, is a snapshot of that time period as well. Because it is almost like looking back at it in 2021 and going like, we didn't realize it at the time. It literally was the end of an era. Like, and
Right.
that era was like from the sort of the Reagan economy up through till 2001, up until September 11th in 2001. And the world kind of seeming like, yeah, everything's getting better, everything's good, right? Like that was sort of
There
the
was so much
mentality.
potential. I think we were on the precipice, and there was potential for the world to go in many different ways. And I
Hmm.
think that the like there's a zeitgeist there at the like the millennium, or what is it? Is it like there was people were like waiting for that to happen for so many years.
Yeah.
The shift just came in a way that was so abrupt and unexpected. Like I don't think, well, I mean, not unexpected if you watch all the documentaries about how uh,
Yeah.
like telegraphed it was that there was going to be a major terrorist event. But anyways, not to be a conspiracy
I, th-
theorist or
I
anything
think
like
I
that,
think
but
for the
but
general public in the
yeah,
moment that we were in, especially as
yeah,
kids. Yeah.
yeah. You just didn't like it's like everybody knew that something was coming, and we just didn't know. It was just out of in a way that we didn't expect. But I think that sort of doom, like we always are as humanity, and I mean even now, what like 30 years, freaking hell, is it 20 years later, 23 years later? Oh, but we're still sort of waiting for the apocalypse, right? And
Yeah.
like the like apocalyptic narratives, it just happened to be on the precipice of something that was quite world shifting, right? But I mean, the like how humanity reacts and how we're advancing ourselves. I was just talking about the Fermi paradox today, actually, with people. But like, what is it that we're moving towards, and what is it that's going to destroy us? Is it ourselves, or is it something from without? Right? And the more, I mean,
Yeah.
the older I go, the more I think it's ourselves that's going to cause our own demise. Uh, Not to be too much of a downer about it, but I think you're totally right. Like whatever was encapsulated in that, there's this beautiful um, ethos that existed in 1999, where we were at that there was enough technology that we could feel it coming, like we could feel the shift in how this was changing our lives. I just don't think we knew the extent to which, but
Yeah.
I don't know. It's it's funny to look back on the technology though too and be like, we thought we had a lot of stuff technology wise.
Yeah.
And like you did, because when you look at 20 years prior to that, I will say the difference between the 80s, like the late 70s and the late 1990s, was much more than what happened between 1999 and 2022. 2021, my gosh, where
Yeah.
are we? Um, right? I mean, I don't know. What do you think about that? Like, I think that there's just definitely like the rapid advancement in what we had in
Um
technology in those 20 years versus this 20 years. The
No, I don't
ability.
necessarily think that that's true. I think that the types of technology, I and I think because we lived through that era, and we're sort of digital natives in that sense, right? Like
Right.
we're right on that cusp, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Of Gen X millennials. It's like we're old enough to
To remember
relate to
pre-technology.
it to Gen X, but we're
Yeah.
young enough to have grown up with the internet.
Yeah.
So I like we live in that weird sweet spot um between generations, between something that really defined two generations, right? So I
Mhm.
think for us it's like, because we bridge that gap, it's like we remember having to get up to change the channel on the TV, right?
Right. Yeah.
But we've also come of age in the era of Netflix at the same time, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which is a very unique perspective. So I think, I understand where you're coming from on that, because I do think that like certain things made astronomical leaps, but then when you really think about, there's two parts to this. One is that like computers at a certain point in the early 2000s got small enough that like we really don't, because we're not actual like electrical engineers or computer scientists. We don't actually care or know how our phones work, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
as much as we look at them and go like, yeah, these haven't really changed since 2008, it's like, yeah, okay, from a design perspective they haven't, but
Yeah.
considering what's on the inside of them, uh they've gone from at most like, oh hey, the big one is 8 gigabytes, to the phone that I have is 128 gigs.
Right.
My
Yeah.
phone
Yeah.
is 128 gigs. My hard drive in 2008 was like, well, probably like maybe 100 gigs,
Yeah.
maybe on my computer, on my desktop computer, right? um
Yeah.
like it's I yeah, like the technology has gotten much more impressive, but in almost imperceptible ways, and the
Right.
manufacturing processes and the efficiency of that stuff, and the sophistication of it is, I think, beyond what you or I really like care to know. So it's harder to see that, whereas it's very easy to see um computers go from punch cards in the 1960s to
Right.
the personal computer
Right. You
desktop
can see
in
the
the
different. Yeah.
90s,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
That's
It's
fair.
very visual, and even like cars change and all that sort of thing. But
Um.
the bigger thing with technology in the last 20 years is something that we don't really talk about a lot, and it has a lot more to do with genetics and uh, advancements in bioscience, and
Oh
what we're
yeah.
currently
Yeah.
living through, and the fact that like here's the only proof that I need to give you. We are acting like the COVID vaccine is another vaccine. Like, oh, they developed another vaccine, and there are a lot of people out there in the world that think that there's live virus in the COVID vaccine, because that's what they understand as a vaccine. They understand live virus vaccines, right? The flu shot, like all the like chickenpox vaccine, all that stuff, right? Like that, oh, we're going to inject you with a small amount of the virus, and it's a benign version, so your body knows how to fight it, so when it encounters the real one, it's already prepared and you have an immune response all ready to go. I think that a lot of people understand that. Not a lot of people understand what an mRNA vaccine actually does, and the
Yeah.
fact that it's nanotechnology. Like, it is like, this is the beginning of a scientific revolution that science fiction has been talking about since like the 1960s, right? Stuff that people were dreaming up and going like, oh yeah, in the year 2000 they'll be able to do this, and it's like, oh, we're about 20 years late, but we're getting there. So where like we now have a method of sending instructions to the body to build things that the body wasn't going to build, right?
Right.
Without introducing the virus, so lowering the risk, right?
Mm-hmm.
And giving it the ability, like, and what we're using it for right now is, hey, this is the spike protein. If you see this, kill it. that's what the COVID vaccine does, right? It goes into your body and it basically just gives your immune system the instructions for, like, hey, when you encounter a coronavirus of this specific type with this spike protein, here's how you fight it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
preparing our body for it. And it's been incredibly effective and it's awesome. Go get your vaccine. I'm getting my third dose on Thursday. I'm very excited about it. I'm excited to get Kara vaccinated as soon as possible. And I think you guys all know how I feel about the vaccines. Go do it. But that technology is, and I think in 10 years we'll look back on it and there will be like this. And I really hope that I'm right on this, you know, assuming that society is still a thing in 10 years.
Not to be
And
touchy, but
I say that, I can say that joking because I am very hopeful. I think that we'll be fine, but we'll adapt. Things will change, but we'll be fine. We almost have too much technology at this point to not. It's just, yeah, what
well,
it
so
looks
one
like.
of the
That's
one of
interesting.
the interesting things, and I guess like for people, because we haven't actually said it on this, but the reason that we're podcasting about the Matrix is because the Matrix Resurrections is
Mhm.
what it's called, is coming up. And so we're obviously podcasting about the other Matrixes before that to get ourselves hyped for the new one. But what I'm interested is sort of how, because I can see, you see in the trailers all the cell phones, right? In the same
Yeah,
way that it wasn't in the first Matrix. And so I'm interested to see how they incorporate the world now from the world in 1999, right? Like
yeah,
what sort of things that they latch on to, because I think that that's an important part. Like it's so tied to the story, is like the technology and how we relate to the technology and
yeah.
what yeah, I
So
don't know, I just think
can I tell you what my prediction is for the new
oh
one?
yeah,
I,
yeah.
I think I think that Neo is the architect, right? And this is
Oh
one of the reasons why I wanted to rewatch the movies, is because I want to watch them, and because I've only ever seen Revolutions, which is the third one. I
yeah,
think I've only seen it the one time, just in the theater, and
yeah,
then
I
maybe
think
I've like watched pieces of it afterwards. But
mhm, mhm.
I think of the only time that I've ever sat down and watched the whole movie was in the theater. Maybe when it came out on DVD, I watched it once. Reloaded, I know I've seen a couple of times all the way through. But I also know that, like, the last time that I watched that was probably when I was in film school, and I know that Mike from 2003 to 2005 was a real big dum dum and didn't know what he was talking about, as opposed to Mike in 2021, who still is a real big dum dum and doesn't know what he's talking about, but is at least self aware of that fact now,
Yeah.
to have a little bit more experience and knowledge to know how much I don't know, and a little bit more wherewithal to pay attention and try and put things together. So rather than thinking that I already had all the answers and ignoring what was in front of me, I want to watch these movies and really, like, try and dig into them and try and figure out what they're actually about. Which, like, watching last night was so much fun because I was like, oh my God, I thought I knew this movie so well. And I do. I've watched The Matrix probably a dozen times at least prior to last night. But I but like I said, with all that extra context and knowledge and experience, watching it again and just being like not just understanding, like I said, like when I was a kid, it like cracked my mind open like a ripe melon, but understanding the depth to which it actually opened me up to a whole lot of perspectives that 13-year-old Mike had not considered, and maybe
Right.
wouldn't have considered at 13 had it not been for the Matrix putting it into this incredibly stylish, fun, digestible wrapper of a sci-fi movie with guns and kung fu, right?
Right.
um just all of that stuff, all
And
these trappings and like the stylistic stuff of the Matrix, really just being like this, it's the spoonful of sugar that
to
delivers
package
the
everything else
medicine,
up. Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
um And now watching it as an adult and being like, this movie is not a good movie. This movie is not a great movie. This movie is a masterpiece. It is like we should have been studying it. We didn't study it in film school. I'll let you know that. Like in 2003 to 2005 when I was in film school, we did not study The Matrix. As a matter of fact, if I had brought up like we should do a critical study of The Matrix, I probably would have I would have been laughed at for that because it would have been like, what? No, that's a stupid blockbuster popcorn movie. And now I look at it and I go like, there is so much here that just like at the time on the surface is amazing and incredible, but because of the gift of hindsight, and especially again relating it back to the Wachowskis and their journey in coming out and you know, sort of realizing their true selves and going through that journey and all of that stuff, and now having that context backwards onto this movie, it's like
Mm-hmm.
there's stuff going on in here that like 1999 we couldn't have understood, right? And like maybe I shouldn't say we couldn't have understood. I couldn't have understood because of where I was at and where society was at and what the expectations were of a 13-year-old boy in 1999.
Right. Yeah.
But now that dialogue is broader, I think that there I wouldn't be surprised to hear anecdotal, you know, like to hear stories from people with similar experiences to the Wachowskis, having watched The Matrix and connected with something else that the rest of us weren't necessarily seeing. So like something in there about, you know, your having your physical body and then the manifestation of your body. I mean, like the moment when they go back into the Matrix for they go into the construct, and Neo's his hair's back to the way that it was in the Matrix, and he doesn't have the plugs and stuff. And Morpheus explains to him, he calls it residual self-image, right? And at the time we're going like, that's rad sci-fi. And in 2021, I'm looking at that and going like, they were writing about something else.
Yeah.
They were writing about an experience inside their own bodies of having this different image of themselves that didn't match their exterior. Yeah. And they put it into a sci-fi wrapper because at the time in 1999, I'm actually like starting to get a little bit of like, I've got emotions like that are sort of building up in me talking about this, because it's such an amazing realization of like that it was so difficult to talk about stuff like that even in 1999, which is so recent.
Yeah.
We've come so far in that time. We still have so far to go because it's still not an ideal situation for anybody. But we've come so far, and the idea that they couldn't actually like tell their own personal story in a literal way, so they wrote this thing. And I don't know, I'm interested to read interviews and stuff as we head into Resurrections to sort of hear in their own words like what they were thinking when they were writing the first movie, and how much of this was like subconscious and how much of it was intentional and that sort of
Just
thing.
like very blatant.
Yeah. But looking back on it retrospectively, it is so clear that conversation is very much a conversation of like the trans experience of like, I am in this physical body that doesn't match how I see myself or like my idealized state, and here's this amazing world that they constructed where through sci-fi and through, you know, nonsense gobbledygook, we're going to put a spike in the back of your skull. Like you can go into a world like they made that dream a pseudo reality, right? Within right. the narrative of this story, which is just such an amazing perspective. And it's why I want to watch the next two movies. It's like, it's that, and then understanding like going into the fourth one, like trying to understand like the plot what the next one's going to be, because I think that it's going to hinge very greatly on the idea of in the I can't remember, I think it's at the end of the second one, they talk about like this isn't the first version of the Matrix. You're not the first one, right? Like
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
it, I think it's like the seventh or something like that. The one that's in the movie, and I every time the one shows up, it ends up causing, like it builds to this thing, and then they just have to reset it, and like the
Yeah.
machines just reset it, and it goes back, and then the one eventually, like it maybe it's designed into the system, maybe it's a
Right.
flaw of the system, it's kind of unclear, but I think that the fourth one is going to very much be like the whole thing of him, like uh with the Neil Patrick Harris character,
Right.
the psychiatrist, and then what's his face,
Not Josh Gad,
the not
character.
Josh
What's
Gad, the other one, yeah,
oh, what's his name?
yeah, Christoph.
Oh,
uh
yeah.
I think his therapist or psychiatrist, whatever, is his therapist psychiatrist. I think that that's an agent. I think that like the blue glasses are a dead giveaway. The way that
Oh,
Neil Patrick Harris is
yeah.
performing is a dead giveaway. Maybe it's a red herring, I don't know, but I think that's a dead giveaway that he is a
Jonathan Groff.
construct of the
Jonathan Groff.
Matrix. He's a program, right?
Right.
And then I
Okay.
think Jonathan Groff, I think that he is another construct, another program, but one that's like designed to help Neo maintain the facade of like, because I think that like he says, so after all this time you're going back to the Matrix.
Back to the
I
Matrix.
think
Yeah.
that in this new world that Neo, that Thomas Anderson is an author, that he's written the books about the Matrix
Yeah. That makes sense.
as like a way of him being able to
Yeah.
process what happened in the previous iteration, but that he is actually
Yeah.
like he's now God in
Right.
this new Matrix, and that
Interesting.
it's actually
Okay.
going to be like him. He's like sort of asleep, right, and him sort of becoming awake to the fact that he is actually uh, the architect of this new Matrix and what that means,
Hmm.
and that I this guy who is seemingly Morpheus but isn't Morpheus, or is he a younger Morpheus? It's really
It's
confusing,
unclear.
right?
Yeah.
It's like an idea of like maybe Neo subconsciously has recreated Morpheus, because Morpheus
Right.
dies off screen. He dies in the video game, in the Matrix Online video game, which is important information for everybody to have going into this new movie. That I'll be curious to see how they tell us
Deal with.
that information. But that like I think that like Neo has like he's like created this character, this person, to come in and like break him out and wake him up, and obviously like who's he going to manifest but Morpheus reborn, right, in order
Right.
to wake him up as the one again, right? So that's where I'm currently sitting with the information that I have in my brain and my very crappy recollection of the second and third movies, but
I'm
having
excited to
rewatched
get
the
to the
first
second
one,
and
I'm
third
like,
ones.
yeah,
I feel like that's like because the first one is such a sort of an awesome film in and of itself that you don't really realize that there's just so much more in this world. And the second and the third one really is the world building where you deep dive.
yeah,
And I feel like that's why it maybe grates on people a little bit, because it's about the world. It's not about the characters in the same sense, where like you really have like a, I don't know, like a hero's journey, right?
yeah,
For the Matrix itself and for Neo and like what he goes through and how he becomes who he is. Um but yeah, I because I don't remember the other two, I'm kind of curious to see how much the fourth one plays into those two as
yeah,
opposed to the first, and how much it does go back to the first one. It's funny that you started out talking about Ghostbusters too, because I feel like that's a franchise that in so many ways they try to reset, but then also keep the same, like in the same, and it's like to various success depending on which movie it is that you're talking about.
yeah,
And I'm going to be really curious with the fourth one, how much it's about calling back to the first one and how much it's about continuing to build the world from the trilogy, which I think is a
Yeah.
different thing, right? Like it's like going to be different in how they approach it, and also in what it is that we're supposed to like connect to,
I
and
think
so.
that much like Ghostbusters Afterlife, not to give too much away in Ghostbusters Afterlife, but I think similarly Matrix Resurrections is a bit of a way of getting a do-over on
On
the other
the
things that have come. So like and I'm not just
right.
talking about the 2016 Ghostbusters. Don't take it in that way. It
Mhm.
actually there is an interpretation of Afterlife that is valid that says that Ghostbusters 2 never happened. There is also an interpretation of Ghostbusters Afterlife that Ghostbusters 2 is also part of the canon, right?
Okay.
And it's
Canon.
inconsequential. You can feel however you
Right.
want to feel about that. Is it a direct sequel to the first movie, or is it a continuation? Is it the third movie in a trilogy?
Right.
It
Right.
is definitely not acknowledging Ghostbusters 2016, but Ghostbusters 2016 doesn't acknowledge the original Ghostbusters. It's in an alternate timeline. It's a parallel.
Right.
It's a
Right.
parallel unit. It's a multiverse. And that's not like just me being like, oh, it's a Ghostbusters multiverse. No, literally, there's a Ghostbusters multiverse. It's in the comics. There's the real Ghostbusters, which is the cartoon series from the 80s and 90s, has its own universe and continuity that is tangentially connected to the movies, but not directly. I mean, I guess directly, but like not beholden to. And then there's the 84 movie, and then there's the 2016, and then there's the IDW comic books, which continue the story from the 1984 movie, from the 1989 movie from Ghostbusters 2, um, and continue it into the future. And then they cross over with the Ninja Turtles in canon, where the Ninja Turtles from the IDW comic book series come over into the world of the Ghostbusters and then go back to their
What?
own world, and they're from
Uh,
separate universes, right? Like, but the stories that they told were very specifically like, hey, we're crossing uh uh dimensions. Like, we're like, you guys, like the turtles have their own dimension, and the Ghostbusters have their own, which is actually different, like because the turtles did another crossover with Batman where it's like that
Well,
one, the Ninja Turtles Batman comics exist in their own self-contained universe. That's not the DC universe, and it's not the Ninja Turtles universe. It's its own
what?
it's its own universe where Gotham exists and New York exists, and in that New York you've got Ninja Turtles, and in Gotham you have Batman. And they
Oh
know about
wow.
each other kind of, but not really until they meet. It's
Nice.
like its own thing. Which is really cool. It's awesome that they did that. Because it allows
Cool.
it to not be like, it doesn't, you don't have to worry about a continuity. You can just tell a cool story where Batman and the Ninja Turtles team up. And then there's the Ninja Turtles Power Rangers comic that they did, where the turtles show up in the Power Rangers comic, but they are the Ninja Turtle. It's in the continuity of the Power Rangers comic, of the ongoing continuity of that by Boom, but it's not the IDW turtles. It's not the cartoon turtles. It's not the ones from the movies. There are Ninja Turtles that live inside the Power Rangers universe, which there's already
Awesome.
precedent for because there was the live action TV show, the Turtles TV show, where they crossed over. Anyways, there's all sorts of stuff all over the place. Marvel and DC aren't the only ones with multiverses, is my point in that. And all of that is to say that I think that the Matrix Resurrections is going to attempt to tie up the loose ends that the original trilogy left, and maybe even retcon a little bit of the stuff that people didn't necessarily like about the first, but without retconning it, which I think is the beautiful thing. I think it'll be a lot like Tron Legacy in that way, where it'll go back and it'll be like, hey, just forget everything that you think you know about this, because it doesn't matter, because this isn't the same Matrix, right? Because Tron Legacy did the same thing, where it was like, yeah, the grid, Tron, yeah, it's a thing, blah 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 blah, yeah, it's a whole thing, right? He goes in, there's Tron. This is not that same place. The grid in this movie is a new grid that Kevin Flynn built specifically to go in and do this stuff. The only holdover is that he brought Tron with him from the old grid. Like he brought the
Right.
old Tron computer program into the new one, and that's the only thing that carries over. So it's like you don't actually have to even watch the first Tron in order to watch Tron Legacy. And I think that Matrix Resurrections will be similar, where it's like, hey, if you've seen the first 3 movies, cool. If you've only seen the original Matrix and you don't care about the other ones, that's also going to be fine. Because I don't think that the Merovingian's going to be a real big part in this one, right? And like if you know who the architect is and you understand that concept from the first trilogy, then you might understand a couple more things when they happen in Resurrections, but I think that it'll also be self-contained. I also think this is the key difference, and having just watched The Matrix last night, this was the I don't know if it was an epiphany, because it wasn't really like, oh, I didn't realize that before. It was sort of an uncovering of something that I'd kind of just forgotten, which is that the first movie is not about, it's not about strength or power, or even like, it's not even about Neo, like using his mind to overcome, like, you know, like the, there is no spoon,
Yeah.
you know, is that
Yeah.
air you're breathing sort of thing. That's not what it's about. That stuff actually all fails. He dies.
Right.
What The Matrix, the first movie, is actually about is that the one thing the machines can't fight, that they can't counter because they can't comprehend, and this is going to sound really corny and stupid, but it's what the movie is about, is
Yeah.
love.
Yeah.
That's what it's about.
Yeah.
Because he dies. He's shot multiple times
Mhm.
in the chest. He flatlines. He's dead. And then Trinity gets on top of him and says, like, no, you can't die
Because
because I
you
love
can't
you.
be. Yeah.
Right? And like,
It
and
is so corny. I love it.
that's what the Oracle told me, is that the man that I would love is the one. So it's you, because I love
And
you.
there.
And it's
Yeah.
like, it's not that he's the one. It's that she loves him and therefore he is the one. He's the one,
Yeah.
and that's why she loves him. And it's like,
Right.
it's
Yeah.
like a Ouroboros snake eating its own tail. Like, you can't have one without the other. It doesn't
Yeah.
exist. And like exactly what Morpheus says to him about what the Oracle says, it's like, she told you what you needed to hear. She said to you exactly what you needed to hear to put you on the path. But as always, he says multiple times in the movies, I can only show you the door, you have to walk through it. And it's like, but it's not about him going like, I'm the one, I have this power. It's actually about Trinity believing that he's the one, and that's
Right.
what makes him the one.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Because
what
without
makes
her. Yeah.
that's what the first movie is about, is that like Agent Smith can't fight that because he can't comprehend it.
Yeah.
It's beyond him, it's beyond the machines to understand how, like, she can literally pull him back from death just through the sheer act of loving him, which is like the most out there thing in a movie full of ridiculous concepts, is that like she literally just, like, she kisses him back to life like a fairy tale. It's a
But it
fairy
is.
tale. The
But
end
it
of
is.
the movie is
It's,
Sleeping Beauty, and then
yes.
the world bends around him and he goes inside Agent Smith and explodes
I
him,
love it.
which is the worst special effect to have ever been put in a movie. It looks awful, but whatever, they
It was so
accomplished what they
long
needed to.
ago. They did it so long ago.
But
I don't
even
know. I
like,
will say, but
go
the
ahead, go ahead.
special effects for what they were I mean, because I remember watching all the docs and stuff about it, and
Yeah,
that accomplishing the shot in the like very first, like when Trinity does the like jump. I'm doing it like I'm like mimicking it right
yeah,
now, but
the
like
arms up,
like the
yeah,
jump and then the like the pan around her, and just seeing how they accomplished that with like the practical stuff that they were able to implement, and then also like the like when they go in to rescue Morpheus, right? And the like all the squibs that go off in like the big lobby, like all the
yeah,
intense guns and all that stuff, but like all the practical stuff that they added in there because they had to meld the two of them. And I think
yeah.
that's, I don't know, I just think that they did a really good job with
Well,
what they had
it's
at the
yeah.
time, right?
The
So you
Matrix and
know.
the Phantom Menace live in this awesome sweet spot where they're right at the end of that
Yeah.
era, where it's like
Yeah.
you're at the
Yeah.
beginning of digital effects becoming actually photoreal and believable.
Hmm.
But you're also at the zenith, like the absolute
Yeah.
pinnacle of practical effects.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so much of that is a lost art now. And granted, like there's still a lot of practical effects and stuff, but there are certain things that like we just don't do it as well as we did it even before. I mean, like the Phantom Menace is even a little bit across that threshold because Yoda looks terrible to the point where like in the Blu-ray he's replaced with the CG version because that puppet,
Oh, dear.
because we'd lost it by then, right? Like nobody
Right.
was making puppets because we just weren't doing those kinds of stories, and people were like, oh, you can't put a puppet in a movie and have it be believable. And it's like, yeah, but we did actually do that in 1980 with Yoda,
Yeah.
and he was
Yeah.
100% believable. And
Mhm.
but Jim Henson had died and the world had moved on, and
Yeah.
without his influence we kind of lost that.
Well,
And
no, Frank Oz was still around, wasn't he?
well,
I
Frank Oz
thought.
is still around, but
Okay.
and Frank Oz has played Yoda in every
Yeah.
appearance in a feature
Yeah.
film. So I actually
But
I
I
don't.
understand what you mean, like in terms of legacy, but
But it's
yeah.
just like those skill sets have sort of like morphed and changed into different things. It's like when Chewbacca shows up in episode 3 and he does not look like Chewbacca, and you're like, I don't know what that thing is, but like that's not a Wookiee, that's a man in a costume, right? Like that's a
Yeah, yeah.
like I wouldn't take my picture with that thing at Disneyland. It's so ugly.
Aw.
It is not a believable Chewbacca. But then somehow like we've come back to it, and I think that we're much better at it nowadays to in recreating that stuff and being a little bit more historical about it and going like, let's not build a better Chewbacca.
Let's
Let's
just go and build the
let's just
original.
use
Yeah.
today's technology to build
Yeah.
him the way that they built him back then.
Yeah.
um and that's why Chewie looks fantastic. I mean, Chewie looks the best. Solo is the best Chewie that we've ever gotten. That Chewbacca is, that's not a costume, that's a real, like that's a Wookiee, that's a real Wookiee. There is no,
Yeah.
they keep saying that Jonas Suotomo guy is in the costume, but I don't believe it. That's Chewbacca. They found an actual Wookiee and they put that Wookiee in that movie. But the
Totally.
Matrix does like live in that weird zone where it's like there's like the thing that goes into his stomach, the bug that goes into his stomach, but
Oh, yeah.
then and it's like it's very CG and whatever, and it's definitely composited and it looks very fake. But then a few minutes later, we get the sequence where he wakes up, and that stuff's for real. Like that
Yeah,
sequence
yeah.
is,
Yeah.
there's actually one moment in that sequence that I think is worth calling out, which is when we do like the pan over to look down, and digital effects and digital environments were so new that the
Yeah.
Wachowskis tried and didn't achieve, but tried for the first time to put an artificial lensing on the shot to try
Oh,
and sell
yeah.
it as like a real
Right.
environment. So like lenses are curved, right? I'm not telling you, Amanda, I'm telling the audience, because for people who might not know, because I know that you know this, but lenses are curved. So like when we shoot stuff with a camera lens, it's like the saying is like the camera adds 10 pounds, right? The reason for that is because the lenses are curved. This is a like more of an old school thing than it is a modern thing, because lenses are better now and there's less distortion and whatever. But they attempted to replicate that lens distortion that you get on like a wide angle lens, like for a really nice, like for a really good establishing shot. Most of the time, this is one of the reasons why most of the time in an establishing shot it's locked, right? Like it's not really moving. Maybe you might get like a very slow far away I pan or something like that, like a really subtle one. But they're in like this big establishing shot as we like zoom over this thing to look down this endless pit of human batteries, and they tried to add a distortion around the edges to make it look like it was through a camera lens, even though it was a purely digital environment. And it was
Right.
such a funny thing of like, now in 2021 I watch that and I go like, good try guys, but like that's like what I would do in After Effects today.
Because
Like
that's how the technology has progressed in 20 years, because what
exactly.
they were doing in big
Yeah.
budget movies, you can now do on your computer at home, so
And do better on my computer.
yeah. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
Adobe now has like so much AI technology in it that like just for the consumer, you can like tell it like, hey, look at this environment and give me fake 3D lighting for it. Like take a
Yeah.
2D picture
Yes.
and and allow me to actually change the lighting on this 2D picture. If it's high enough resolution and you've got like the raw camera data, you can do that now with Photoshop and Lightroom. So like you can literally add lights that were not physically there when you shot that picture in Photoshop and move them around in a 3D environment, and it's smart enough to like look at your picture and go, yeah, I think I understand the shape of these objects, right? Like you don't even to do that even 10 years ago, not to mention 22 years ago, would have required several VFX artists and, you know, a render farm. And now I can do it on my laptop, and it's like, it's kind of ridiculous.
The world is changing.
We're coming up on, I mean, like the episode's not 2 hours and 40 minutes, but we've been recording for 2 hours and 40
we've been recording
minutes.
for a very long time. Yes.
And I still have to edit this whole thing and post it. So, I could talk about this movie probably for another hour.
The good thing is that I think over the course of the other two movies, we'll keep coming back.
Yeah.
You can't stop talking about The Matrix when you talk about the other two. So I feel like there's plenty more chit chat about The Matrix to come. So,
well, and I think you'll probably have more to say in the next episode when we're talking about the sequel,
yes,
right?
100%. Well, because I mean, I like those are the ones. Like, I don't know. I just remember the vivid, like the big car. They got bigger, I feel like, but not more substantive. And I'm interested to explore like what I can find in them going forward.
Yeah.
So
again, it will be interesting.
It's not the same as like the deep cuts that you're talking about and like all the character and the like. It was such a revolutionary thing. And
well, I don't think that the second and third one are about love.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's fair.
But where I'm hopeful is that based on the trailer and what we've sort of heard about why this one's being made, it feels to me like this one's actually going back to
the roots,
to the first one, to the roots, and this fourth one is actually also about love. So, I'm excited. I'm as excited for this Matrix movie as I have been for Star Wars movies, I think. I don't know if anything's going to top Ghostbusters Afterlife for me from this year, because that is, I'll talk more about that tomorrow. But yeah, man. I don't know what I did to get so lucky with everything that I care about being the things that are successful and bankable and coming back and getting all of this money to make the most lavish, ridiculous sequels imaginable. There is only one left on the checklist that they keep saying like it's gonna happen, and it keeps getting closer and closer, but not happening yet, is The Last Starfighter. Man, I really hope that they make that, but it deserves a sequel. But I think that's it. I think we did it. I think yes. I think that's an episode.
I'll give it to you. I think you did it. I think you did a lot of talking in this one. So
I did. Well, you talked a lot when we were talking about Pete Davidson. So
priorities. There we go. And cool. Anyway, it's good. I'm excited. Thank you, Mike, for
so so stay tuned for our Ghostbusters. I guess it'll be a metaphysical fiction. I don't know. It'll be on this feed. You guys, you'll get it. Which will be later this week, and then next week will be the Patreon exclusive for everybody. That's a what is it, $5 and up over on Patreon. And then in 2 weeks, we'll be back and talking about The Matrix Reloaded. Right?
Yeah.
Is that?
I think so.
Yeah.
Reloaded, because then Revolutions is the third one.
And Enter the Matrix is the video game that was the prequel story to The Matrix Reloaded, which tells the story of Jada Pinkett Smith's character and her buddy.
Wasn't the Animatrix part of that as well?
The Animatrix came out in between, but the Animatrix, I don't remember because Neo doesn't appear in any of the Animatrix. I don't think, or if he
Right.
does,
It's just
it's like
isn't it like mostly Nebuchadnezzar stuff? Like I don't think I watched the
it's
Animatrix.
a lot of how did this happen?
Right.
So
Yeah,
there I
okay.
think there's 2 or 3 shorts in the Animatrix that are about like the machines. I know that there's definitely one that's like about one of the stories, may be true, maybe not true, but one of the stories that the machines tell of the first machine that basically said no.
Right.
It's the Matrix version of Battle for the Planet of the Apes.
Ooh. All right. Very exciting.
I wish they'd make a new Planet of the Apes movie so that I could force you to watch all of the Planet of the Apes movies to talk about them.
They have always been on my radar, so one day I
They're
shall
so
watch
good.
Planet of
They're
the
so
Apes.
good. That whole franchise is gold. That's one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you guys for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.
Stay safe, everybody. Wash your hands and be kind to one another.
Follow the Thunderquack Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook by searching the Thunderquack Podcast. You can support us in 3 ways. First, by heading to the podcast service of your choice and leaving a rating and review. Second, by going to store.thunderquack.com to pick up some merch from your favorite podcasts. And last but not least, by heading to patreon.com/thunderquack to kick in with your monthly pledge of support and get cool rewards like early access and extended episodes. The Thunderquack Podcast is the official podcast of thunderquack.com. Head to thunderquack.com to discover more great podcasts.